بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء محمد المصطفى وعلى آله المجتبى رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما وزدنا حكمة والحمد لله على كل حال. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Those that have joined us this evening and those that will watch this later on, inshallah. We've now reached the prayer of sick. We covered some extra rulings regarding the Sayyidah Sahu last week. We looked at some extra cases, and one of the things that I mentioned was that there are around about 70, according to some scholars, according to some even more cases of when a person may need to do Sayyidat Sahu. And so there's a number of other cases too, which may require the extra prostrations of forgetfulness. But as a principle, those are the things that we covered last week. There was one more thing that that came to my mind earlier on today as well. It's a common question that I'm asked, and so the question is, if I forget what rak'ah I am in prayer, what do I do? So if someone forgets whether they are on their second rak'ah or their third rak'ah, what do they do then? Well, there's two things here. There's two options. So either a person has what we call dhan ghalib, they have an idea, but that idea it's not a 50-50 doubt, but rather they are 75% or more certain that they are on one of those two rak'ahs. They're either on the third or the fourth rak'ah, because of some sort of sign, or they remember that they sat 2 units ago, right? So in their sitting, the first sitting that they did, it was 2 units ago. So they instantly remember that. So now they know that they're in the fourth rak'ah, or they remember that they sat only 1 unit ago. So some sort of indication, something that they remember, which indicates to them that they are in the unit that they think that they are in. So that's now what we call predominant or dhan ghalib. They have a sort of overwhelming assumption, a predominant assumption that they are in a certain rak'ah. If that's the case, then they go with that. They go with whatever their heart is inclining towards, and that's the rak'ah that they're in, and they finish the prayer off without having to do anything extra. However, if they are completely unsure, it's a 50-50 now. They could be in the third rak'ah or they could be in the fourth rak'ah. Then in this case, if this is the first time that this has happened to them, or it usually does not take place, this doesn't happen to them, it's very rare for this to happen, in that case, then they repeat the prayer. And if it's regular, they get this waswasa from the shaitan. They get this sort of whispering often, where they forget which rak'ah they're in, the third or the fourth or second or first or second. If it's quite frequent within their prayer, then they should take the lower number, and they should make Sayyidat Sahu at the end. They should make 2 extra prostrations at the end, right? So if it's the first time that this is happening, or it's really rare for this to happen, then they should repeat the prayer. And if it's frequent, if it always happens, they always forget which rak'ah they're on, then take the lower number and make 2 extra sajdas of forgetfulness at the end, just to be on the safe side. That's the way to resolve that situation, right? But if their heart's inclined towards a particular number, the heart's inclined towards the third rak'ah, then in the third rak'ah they don't need to make any extra prostrations at the end. right? And so that's another mas'ala that came to my mind earlier on today. So I thought we'll start with that, because that's to do with the prostrations of forgetfulness, which we just finished at the end of last lesson. So we're moving on to the sick person, and I shared this principle at the start of last week, at the end of last week, sorry. But we're going to expand on this now. So the principle, hardship brings about ease. And so this is it's one of the objectives of Sharia. It's from the maqasid, but at the same time, uh, it's relevant to a lot of different things within fiqh. And so it's quite relevant when it comes to sick person's prayer. So hardship brings about ease, meaning that when things become difficult, when your circumstances become difficult naturally, right? You become sick, or you're not able to do certain actions of the prayer which you normally would be able to do. Then with that hardship, there is fiqh brings about ease, right? So hardship brings about ease. So the way that a person who is unwell or sick, the way that he or she would make the prayer would be different to the normal case. And this is why, if I take you back to this these categories that we spoke about earlier on in our in our fiqh lessons, that the rulings are of two types. You have what we call the azima, the normal case, and then you have what fiqh gives us, the dispensation, right? The way out, right? So the dispensation is given rukhsa when the case is no longer normal. So when our situation or circumstances are not normal, then fiqh then tells us that you can make rukhsa here, right? Dispensation is given. And so normal case would be a person stands in prayer. But sometimes fiqh may give a way out by suggesting that a person can sit and pray if they can't stand and pray. And that sitting for in substitute for standing would be the dispensation, right? But then dispensation has types. There's a type of dispensation where the mukallaf, the one who is responsible, has a choice, right? So a choice between this or this or this. I can either do this or this now, right? So in normal case there would be no choice, but in dispensation, the dispensation would be that you can either do this, or you can do this, or you can do this. We will look at the dispensation, the examples of choice later on. Or the other type of dispensation is the badal, the substitute. So it's a substitute of the azima, the normal case. And the substitute could either be original or incidental. We spoke about these terms earlier on as well. And so sitting instead in substitute for standing is the incidental dispensation in case where a person is not able to make the normal ruling, where a person is not able to make the normal prayer. They would then sit and make the prayer. And so sitting is a rukhsa that's been given by Sharia, right? But every rukhsa now has conditions. You can't just take the rukhsa. We have to always go to the normal case. That's what's wajib upon us. And the rukhsa can only be taken where a need arises, right? The dispensation, we will only go to dispensation where the conditions are fulfilled. And so we're going to look at those conditions in the case of a sick person then. So what are the conditions that a person has to fulfill for them to be able to take this rukhsa? So sickness is of two types. There's either an actual sickness where a person would become worse, right? So they have sickness, and so or they have some sort of condition, and so if they were to follow the azima, the normal case, whether that is in prayer or whether that is in in wudu or whatever other form of worship, if they were to follow the azima, the normal ruling, then they would become the sickness would worsen. That is called actual sickness. The legal term for it is the Shar'i term for it is the actual sickness. The affective sickness is not that the sickness worsens by following the normal ruling, but that there's delay in recovery. So when there's delay in recovery, then that is affective sickness. You're effectively sick. You may not actually be sick, but if you were to do that action, if you were to pray in that manner, in the normal way, then it would delay recovery, right? And who establishes this? It's established through in three ways. This is what the fuqaha say. Either you establish sickness, whether actual or affective, through an upright Muslim doctor. And the reason why that condition of a Muslim doctor, the doctor being a Muslim, is because a non-Muslim doctor would not be able to understand the importance of worship, right? And so Anthony, right, would say, or Andrew would say that, well, Muhammad, you don't need to use water, right? So you're not allowed to use water. And obviously Muhammad wants to pray, Ahmed wants to pray. And they asked the doctor, well, can I wash my arms for to purify myself for the prayer? Andrew says, no, that won't be allowed, or that will worsen your condition. It may not, but they're really taken the opinion that is really cautious. But the issue here is that Anthony or Andrew do not understand the importance of the prayer. And so if it was Zayd or Bakr, right, a Muslim doctor, they would understand the importance of worship, of the 5 daily prayers, of wudu. And so therefore, maybe they would give their medical opinion would be in line with that. Like they would, they would try to give you a medical opinion that kept or considered the worship too, and so that's why it's important for the opinion to be from a Muslim doctor and upright, because again, if it's a doctor that if it's a Muslim, but they're not upright, by upright we mean in public they are seen as good Muslims, morally upright Muslim. If it's a person who drinks openly or engages in other haram actions openly, then how will they give an opinion that is in accordance to Islam? How would why would they even consider worship of that person, or why would they even hold that as importance if they are not if they're committing haram themselves, right? And so upright and Muslim, these are conditions, and for that reason. Now, this isn't set in stone. Well, what we're saying is, if, say, for example, a doctor to whom you have given, you've told them how important worship is for you. You've told them that the 5 daily prayers are incredibly important. They are an obligation from God, and you're a person who practices and takes their faith really seriously. Now, following that conversation, if Andrew, despite you telling him how important worship is for you, he says, or she says to you that I understand all of that, but you still cannot, you can't stand for 2-3 minutes, because of your issues with your back, or you can't use water, at all. So if having understood all of that, they still make that judgment, then I think this is this would be acceptable. And so, in some cases there are no Muslim doctors to give you that opinion. But anyway, that's the first way of establishing sickness. The second is prior experience. Maybe you've had this condition before, and you know that if you were to use water, if you were to stand in prayer, then it would either delay the condition, the recovery, or it would worsen the situation. In that case, then, since you have prior relevant experience, then you can make that judgment yourself. The third is clear and obvious signs. Maybe you've seen it happening to someone else. Maybe you've seen that illness or that sickness with someone else, and they also used water, or they stood and prayed, and it worsened, or it delayed their recovery. In that case, these are clear and obvious signs. You can again make that judgment to establish that you are now legally sick. And so since you are sick, the normal azima rulings don't apply. You now can move towards the rukhsa. You don't need to go to a mufti or a local imam sahib and say, okay, imam sahib, what this happened, and so what's the ruling? You don't need to do that. I mean, this is exactly what fiqh is supposed to be, right? Fiqh is not a set of a linear sort of rulings. Fiqh is deep understanding, and we keep on tapping into that word of deep understanding. It's fahm, and once you have that fahm, then you can actually apply that deep understanding to every aspect of your life. But you have to initially have that fiqh, that deep understanding. And so fiqh is supposed to give you enough confidence that you're able to make these sort of judgments yourself. This is what it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be, okay, I've learnt 10 things. Now, if a scenario comes which requires, the 11th thing, I need to go to someone else, and the teacher again, or the imam again, or the mufti again, and I need to take their opinion. Actually, you don't need to take their opinion on issues that are not so sophisticated, right? And so these are things that we should be able to have deep and good understanding, that we're able to find answers for ourselves. That's really the point. We should be able to, and this is why the way that we have consistently been covering the fiqh of ibadat is based upon these principles. And so once you understand the principle, and once you apply the principle once or twice, then you will be able to extend that principle to other scenarios and other situations. And that's really the whole point. And so these are the ways in which we establish the sickness. And so I'll just show you the sick person's prayer in itself then. So the sick person, if and by sickness here, I mean, sick is really, it's a very general kind of term, isn't it? But we're talking about someone who is unwell, that they are not able to make the prayer in the way that the prayer is supposed to be made, right? And so that's what we are. That's our understanding here of a sick person. A sick person is someone who's not able to make the prayer the way that the way that it's brought to us, right? And so the question that we ask is, can the person stand, right? If the person can stand, they can stand up straight, right? Then they have to pray normally. Then they will make the normal prayer, right? If they cannot stand, then the question is, can they do ruku or sujud? Can they bow or can they prostrate? Right? So if they can't stand, say they have some issues with their back, they can't stand for long. And so if they have issues with their back and they can't stand for long, then the question is, can they do ruku or sujud? If they can do ruku or sujud, then they can't sit on a chair and pray. Right? So if a person can do sajda, they can be on their knees and they can place their forehead on the ground. They cannot sit on a chair and pray now, right? Because the sitting on the chair and prayer would mean that they're not able to achieve the sajda. And so if they can bow and prostrate, then they must pray seated on the ground so they can achieve the prostration. And the prostration is really important. I'm going to just mention about that. But if they cannot prostrate, they cannot bow and they cannot prostrate, then the question is, can they move their head? Right? And if they can move their head, right, they're laying back, they're laying on their bed or on ground or wherever, as long as they can move their head, then they will pray through these gestures of the movement of the head, right? Seated or laying down, however they feel comfortable, they will make their prayer using the movement of the head. And so what they would do is they should stretch their legs out, so that they're laying back, stretch their legs towards Qibla, right? So in this case, it's a necessity. It's not seen as disrespectful. They would stretch their legs towards Qibla. They will lift their head up slightly, right? So they'd have some pillow and lift their head up slightly. And now they would pray using the gestures, the head gestures. And if they cannot bow, they cannot pray using the head either. They cannot pray with their head. Then in this case, prayer is postponed. They don't have to. I mean, they're not going to pray, right? They're not going to pray. They're not going to make that prayer if they cannot use their head, right? Now, do they make qada for that? The fuqaha say that if they cannot pray for more than 6 prayers, right? So if they cannot pray for more than 6 prayers because of their sickness, then there is no qada for any of the prayers. So they are maybe they're unconscious, or maybe they're in a coma, or maybe they just they are completely, like, they can't move their head. Their entire body is numb, right? Now we would count the prayers, or they would count the prayers. How many prayers have passed? If more than 6 prayers have passed and they haven't been able to make the prayer, then all of the prayers now going forward until they're able to move their head minimum would be postponed. They wouldn't need to make those prayers. There would not be qada on those. If, however, it's less than 6 prayers, 6 or less prayers, then in that case, then they would have to make qada. So if they were sick for 5 prayers, 3 prayers, 2 prayers, they weren't able to make, they weren't able to pray even with head movement for less than 6 prayers, then they would have to make qada when they get better, right? Now, as just going back, taking you back to the sajda, the importance of sajda. Really, qiyam and ruku are considered as wasa'il of the sajda. They are means to get to the sajda. Sajda is the maqsood of the prayer. It is the most important action of the prayer. There is nothing more important than the sujood within the prayer. Sajda has it's the objective of the prayer, right? And so therefore, since qiyam and ruku are means, right? When a sajda is not, if a person is not able to make the sajda, if a person is not able to prostrate and place their head on the ground, then they don't need to do the means that lead to that maqsood. If they are so sick that they can't do sajda on the ground, then they are permitted to leave the standing and the ruku, right? Because the ruku and the standing are only means, right? The objective is the prostration. So if a person is incapable of fulfilling the objective, then there is no longer a need for them to fulfill the means, which is the ruku and the qiyam, the standing and the bowing. They are dropped, right? And that's why this is why it's incredibly important for people that that can make sajda, right? They can actually, if they were to sit on the floor and make sajda, they would perfectly be able to do that. Now, it's important that they do not sit on chair. Sitting on chair is not really a thing, right? If a person is not able to stand and pray, then they should sit on the ground and pray, right? Because they still have to do the sajda, right? If they're not able to sit on the ground and pray because they can't do the sajda, then the chair is it's not even it's useless. Then they can lay down and pray, right? Then they can sit on a bed, and then they can. So if they can't make the sajda, then that's okay. Then they can sit wherever and make the prayer, right? But the often this is what happens in masajid, even at home, when a person feels sick or unwell or can't stand for the prayer, or they can't bow down. That motion of going from the standing position to bowing or into prostration, it's painful. And so what do people do? They sit on the chair. And so when you sit on the chair, you're not making any of the fard of the prayer. You're not making the sajda, you're not making the qiyam, the standing, you're not making the ruku, right? None of these important fara'id are being fulfilled, right? And the most important fard is the sajda, the maqsood, the objective of the prayer, right? And so if a person can't stand and pray, then they should certainly sit on the ground and pray, and that's the way to do it. Now, there's other scenarios that often crop up as well. What if a person is say sitting on a chair and they have a table in front of them? Now they can make the sajda. Or can they do this? Can they make the sajda on the table in front of them? This is makruh, to raise something up from the ground and bring it all the way up for sajda to be done upon it. This is disliked. So this is not allowed. So again, a person should be on the ground and making the sajda from there. And now, as for if someone is praying, whether they are sitting down or whether they are sat on a chair, on a bed, or whatever, of course they would only be sat on a chair and on a bed because they can't make the sajda. That's the only case where they would be allowed to sit on a chair and make the prayer. Otherwise, they would have to sit on the floor and make the prayer, on the ground and make the prayer. Now, if someone is sitting on a chair and they're doing the bowing, the ruku and the sajda, then they just need to be careful. The sajda needs to the gesturing of the sajda needs to be lower than the ruku, right? So again, often people ask in terms of the ruku and sajda whilst they sat on a chair, how should it be? Well, the ruku should be lowering the head slightly, going forward, and then the sajda should be a bit more, right? And that's it. So the sajda should be seen as it should be lower. The gesturing of it should be lower than the ruku. That's all it is. And so this is how a person who is not able to stand, they will pray in this manner. So they will sit on the ground and make the prayer. And if they can't sit on the ground or they can't make sajda, then they don't have to stand either. Often you see people standing, right, and then sitting on the chair and making the sajda. If you're not achieving the sajda, then you don't really need to stand either. But of course, you can stand if you want to, right? Okay. Now, as for praying on planes, trains, ship, and so on and so forth, we will, of course, the traveler's prayer we haven't covered. We will come to the traveler's prayer itself, but these are modes of transport where it's difficult to fulfill the conditions or the arkan, the fara'id of the prayer properly. So the standing, that's a fard of the prayer. The sajda on the ground is a fard of the prayer, and so on and so forth. How do we make prayer on these modes of transport? Like, for example, ship. Now I start with ship because maybe it's the least used mode of transport now, but at one point when the fuqaha were writing their books, this would have been it would have been one of the most more frequent modes of transport. And so they've written extensively on praying on a ship. Just as a I can see some questions. I'll come to those, inshallah. Let me just cover the ship and I'll come to those. As a principle now, that which usually occurs is akin to that which always occurs. That's a principle. Now, at this point, you might not understand how is this relevant to praying on a ship, but just remember this: that which usually occurs is akin, is equal to that which always occurs, right? Now, prayer on a ship is valid seated, since the ship may be rocking. That's the usual sort of situation. Usually a ship is rocking. Whether a ship is stationary or whether a ship is moving, it is rocking, right? And so prayer is valid seated since the ship may be rocking, since that's what usually happens, right? And so the principle is that which usually takes place is akin to that which always takes place. So what always happens is that a ship is rocking, right? That's the normal scenario of a ship. And so it's rocking when it's moving. But even when it's not moving, even when it's stationary, even when it's at the port, even when it hasn't started, the journey hasn't started, it's anchored at the shore, it's still going to be moving. And since it's still going to be moving, then the ruling would be that you can make the prayer sitting on a ship. This is it now, right? As a general rule now, sitting and making the prayer on a ship is allowed, right? But only on a ship. And that's why I mentioned that ship is a unusually different scenario than other modes of transport. Plane and train and car are all similar, right? They all have similar ruling. Ship has a different ruling, and the ruling of ship is that a fard can be dropped, like the sitting fard, a standing fard. You can sit and make the prayer on a ship, right? And so if you're praying on a ship, either the prayer is going to be made whilst the ship is sailing at sea. In that case, you just pray seated, because it's a ship is always moving when it's at sea. What if it's anchored at shore, right? Now, if it's anchored at shore and you can't leave the ship, right? You can't exit the ship because you've already, the boarding has taken place and it's going to move, but there's some technical issues and so on and so forth. If you can't leave, whether it's steady or unsteady, you're going to pray standing. And if you can exit, then if it's steady, then you pray standing, and if it's unsteady, then the prayer is invalid, because you're going to, if you pray seated in that case, because you're able to leave, and so therefore you're praying whilst seated when you could have prayed whilst standing. Right now, like I mentioned, in the case of ship, it's probably not as relevant to us as the journey on a train and plane and car maybe, and so that's why these are more important, inshallah. I'm just gonna see what questions we have. Brother Abdul Najib asked, 4 sunnahs of Asr, do you read in At-Tahiyyat, Durood Sharif, and then get up and start with what in the Hanafi school? Yes, so the 4 sunnahs of Asr are sunnah ghair mu'akkada. The sunnah ghair mu'akkada are prayed in units of 2, right? So it's like 2 and then 2. So without the salam in between. So when you finish the first 2 units, how do you finish the 2 units? Well, you read at-tahiyyat, and you read salawat, and you read the dua, and then you say salam. But in 4 rak'ah, you wouldn't say salam after the 2. So you read up to the dua, and then you stand back up. You will now read the next 2 as if these are your first 2. So you start, actually the 3rd rak'ah, you start with subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika. You start with thana, right? Because the sunnah ghair mu'akkadas are read in 2s, right? So you 2 and then 2. Hopefully that's clear. Abu Mohsen, when sitting on the ground to pray, can you sit cross-legged if you cannot sit in the tashahhud position? Yes. Actually, there is no. So if you're sitting on the ground due to sickness, right? You're praying a sick person's prayer. Then there is no particular way of sitting. Of course, it's probably better for you to sit the way you would sit in tashahhud, with the right foot erected and the left foot on the ground, and your entire weight being on the left side. That would be better, but there is no, if you want to sit cross-legged, then that's fine. I had a case where someone had they had broken their leg. They had fractured their ankle, or they had a massive cast on their leg. And so they were making the prayer, and they were making it in Jama'ah. So they could make the sajda, right? Sajda wasn't an issue. It was just that the way that they were sat in the rest of the prayer would be that their legs are facing out, or at least one leg is, right? One leg's towards the Qibla, the other leg's folded away, and then when it came to they could do all the rest of the actions sat on the floor. It would just be the sajda where they would have to maneuver, just move slightly, and then make the sajda. If they, since they can make the sajda, it would then be wajib for them to pray in that manner, and they cannot pray sat on a chair. And so, sitting, or the position of sitting, it doesn't now matter at all. You can sit in whatever position you feel comfortable with, as long as you can make the sajda, right? If there's time, someone asked this question. If there's time, I'm trying to make up for years of missed prayers every day. Is it okay to pray the missed prayers after Asr, before the forbidden time when the sun is yellow? Of course, yes, you can. Uh,
What do they mean?
so there's three different
We'll ask them to clarify.
makruh times. I mean, this is what I'm assuming. They can clarify actually if you want to, unless I've understood the I haven't understood the question properly. But there are three makruh timings: the morning time, fajr, after you pray the fard of fajr, up until 20 minutes after sunrise, you shouldn't make any prayer. The zenith, the time when the sun is at its peakest position during the day, and the evening time just before sunset, 20 minutes before sunset. That's all. That timing is makruh time. The qada can be made just before the sun is about to set. So those 20 minutes or 25 minutes or half an hour, just to be on the safe side, you can make qada up to that time. Yeah. I can't find an instruction on witr prayer for the Hanafi school. Every source says a different thing. How do we make it distinct from Maghrib? The way to make the Hanafi witr, by the way, you know, we've covered all of this, alhamdulillah, in our previous sessions of fiqh. So if you they subscribed.
No, so this is public. So
okay, it's public, everyone. Right? So
if
okay.
they'd like to access, they can subscribe.
Yeah, if you'd like to access all the lessons, then you can subscribe and get those lessons. You know, I'm not trying to do a plug-in here, but but we do, yeah, absolutely. You know, this session takes place every Monday evening, and again, the way that we have covered the fiqh, it's based upon those principles. It's about a person having confidence in being able to answer their own questions, right? It's just, you know, does it meet with this principle? Does it sit with this principle? If it doesn't, then no. If it does, then this is okay, and so on and so forth. So the witr prayer, the difference between the witr and the maghrib, the three fard of maghrib, is that the witr in the Hanafi madhab has the qunut, right? So in the third rak'ah, we have the qunut, right? That's the only thing that makes it different, right? Whereas in the other madahib, the qunut is not recited in witr. And so we have three rak'ah witr. The qunut is in the third rak'ah after takbir, where the hands are raised, and then the dua of qunut is recited before the ruku', which is wajib in prayer, and then you finish the rest of the prayer just like any other prayer, right? And so that's the difference between the two. So it's the qunut in the third rak'ah. Jummah prayer after two fard in Jummah, after which why do you read for sunnahs and not for fard as dhuhr prayer? Brother Abdul Najib's asked this question. The reason for that is because the fard can only be read once of that moment. So the fard of that moment, we call that in Arabic, we call it ada. And the fard of the past, that's from a previous time, of a different time, is called qada, right? We understand qada, right? So qada is when you miss the prayer, meaning you're now going to make the prayer in the time in other than the time that it was actually prescribed in, right? That's called qada. Now, when you make the prayer, the fard prayer in the time that it was actually prescribed in, that prayer is called ada. The ruling is that you cannot pray two ada fard prayers together, right? You can make two fard ada and 100 qada, right, next, with each other, but you can't have two ada together, right? That's the first thing. Secondly, And therefore, of course, when you pray 2 fard of Jummah, you now can't pray 4 fard of Dhuhr, because 4 fard of Dhuhr are also ada. They are in their prescribed timing. The 2 fard of Jummah are also in their prescribed time. And so therefore you can't have 2 adas together like that. That's the first thing. The second is, since Jummah is actually a substitute of Dhuhr, right? And so Jummah is the Dhuhr now. You don't have Dhuhr. Dhuhr is what? Dhuhr is the 4 fard. That's Dhuhr. Now the sunnahs are the extra. That's not Dhuhr, right? The Dhuhr is the 4 fard. And so Jummah is in place of Dhuhr. And so therefore the 4 fard now convert to 2. They don't convert to 2 fard because you still read, they convert to sunnahs, but you have the 2 fard of Jummah. So you pray the 2 fard of Jummah, then you pray 4 sunnahs, right? So those fard of Dhuhr, which have now been taken by the 2 fard of Jummah, instead of the 4 fard of Dhuhr, you just now pray sunnahs, right? Hopefully that's clear.
Continue with the class.
Any other questions?
No, we'll continue the class, but just mention that we did this and ask them maybe actually if it's beneficial for them.
Yeah. If you're praying tahajjud, this question has just come in. If you're praying tahajjud and Fajr times enters after you finish the first rak'ah, is your tahajjud accepted? Yeah, I mean, tahajjud, remember, is it's a nafil prayer. It's not it's not prescribed in a particular timing. It doesn't have a start time and an end time. It has a recommended time, which is the mustahab time, which is according to sunnah the last third of the night. But again, the last third of the night is so that the struggle is there. So you've got out of bed, you've made wudu, you've stood in prayer when the entire world is sleeping. Now, once you've made that struggle and you've got up and you've made the prayer, it's a nafil prayer. Now it can actually be read in Fajr time, right? Or it can, if it started before the Fajr timing starts, it's still tahajjud. It would still be still be classed as tahajjud, because it doesn't have a prescribed timing. So it's not like the tahajjud strictly ends with the starting of Fajr. It doesn't really work like that. The greater meaning of tahajjud is the juhd within it. It's actually the difficulty within it. It's actually reviving that night, right? It's giving life to night. That's all it is. And so you've given life to night by actually waking up. Of course, if you, by the time you make wudu and Fajr has started, or you've started but then now Fajr time start, this is okay, right? So yeah, it's more to do with the juhd. Okay. Yes, so the dua could be made as long as the dua in prayer. So if you're making a dua in any prayer, this is right, except the fard prayer. Fard prayer has to be strictly the masnoon duas, right? It has to be Subhana Rabbiyal A'la and so on. In other than the fard prayer, what I mean by other than fard, I mean the nawafil. In nawafil prayer, you can make in sajda, you can make dua in Arabic. You can make the duas in Arabic, right? But it has to be in Arabic again, because the prayer, the condition of the prayer is that the prayer has to be in Arabic. So once you divert from that condition and you make a dua that's not in Arabic, then you have you've now gone away from one of the important aspects of the prayer, which is to be in Arabic. And so that's why you can make any dua in the sajda of nafil, but it has to be in Arabic. Now, if you want to make a dua in your own language, then make it outside the prayer, right? Then go in sajda. This is okay, right? To make the dua in sajda, but not for that sajda to be a sajda of a prayer. Make it a sajda outside the prayer, right? That's the best way to do it, right? Yeah, if you're making masnoon du'as, then of course this is okay. Yeah, if it's masnoon du'as, then that's fine. But if it's a du'a that is in your own language and so on and so forth, that's then to be made outside the prayer in sajda. This is the way. This is the way that it should be. Okay, I'm just gonna. So we'll just finish with the praying on planes and trains and car. And like I mentioned, these are very, all three of them are very similar, right? As a general rule, remember this: if a person was to neglect a fard of the prayer, a pillar, a rukn of the prayer, a condition of the prayer, without naturally, without it being placed upon them like that. So if they were to choose to neglect that, for example, then the prayer will not be valid, right? If they, for example, could make the prayer with all its conditions and all its arkan, but they choose not to make it like that, then their prayer will not be valid. But if due to some sort of some circumstance or situation, like the person who is sick, it's not, that's not out of their own choice, but it's naturally it has happened like that. If naturally or due to some sort of situation that's come upon them, if for that reason they neglect, not in this case now neglect, but they leave a pillar of the prayer, then the prayer will be valid. The prayer is valid. Now let's take an example of the train, the issue. So with train, where would you pray? I mean, where would a person pray in a train? They would most likely pray on their seat. Would this be allowed, praying on a seat? Well, if they're praying on their seat, then what are they doing? They are missing the standing, which is a fard, and also the sajda, which is the maqsood of the prayer, right? It's the thing that makes prayer, right? The sajda. And so they would be leaving qiyam, standing, and sajda. Is that allowed in prayer? No. Someone may argue, well, they're not doing it out of their own the circumstances are like that they have to sit on their chair and pray. Actually, no. Can they pray in the aisle, right? Is it possible for them to pray in the aisle or pray in the area where it's clear where the two what do you call them, the two trains, the two carriages, the two carriages, where the two carriages connect, that area? Can they pray there? Yeah, they possibly could. So they would be fulfilling all their conditions. And so because they are leaving the standing and the sujood when they are sitting and praying, and they're not leaving because it's been forced upon them, but they are leaving because they out of their own choice. Because of that, prayer on train is not valid, right? It won't. In the Hanafi school, praying on a train is not valid. Similarly, praying on a plane is not valid either, because there is an area where you can pray standing up and doing the sajda. Now, if someone was to say, oh, due to turbulence, you're not allowed to stand, or because of maybe there's very little time left, and the seat on sign has come on, and everyone has to get the belt on. The belt signs come on, and everyone has to get the belt on and sit in their seat. In that case, then you may make the prayer because you only have 5-10 minutes left. So you may make the prayer sitting on the seat of the plane. However, in the Hanafi madhab, if you have no issues, like there's no sickness. If due to other than sickness you have made the prayer sitting, you have to make qada afterwards. And so therefore that even that prayer that you have made on a plane sitting, you would have to make it later on. Once you've arrived at your destination, you would have to make it with all its conditions. And so therefore praying on a plane, sitting on a chair, and praying on a train sitting on a seat, the prayer is not valid. All right, it's not actually making, I mean, you know, some people say, are you Hanafis always making things difficult, right? But this is the dispensation, and the fuqaha have given us this. So if you can't make the, if you can't you know, if someone out of the, you know, they always make the prayer and they don't want it to be qada, then that's fine, make the prayer. You can make the prayer in its prescribed time, sat on a chair, on a train or on a plane, but sat on a seat rather, sorry. But you have to then make the qada with all the conditions, with all fulfilling all the conditions of the prayer. That's important, right? So if you do make it on a plane or on a train, you have to fulfill the condition. Similarly the car. If I've seen people making prayer in the car. You can stop at any point, right? You can stop and park it on the side and make the prayer. And so therefore on a car you cannot, inside a car you cannot make the prayer because you can't do the sajda. And so therefore you have to fulfill the prayer with its conditions of standing, and especially the condition of sajda on the ground. That sajda has to be made on the ground. And so that's important. So car, plane, train, prayer should not be made. It should be made off of these. And if you do make the prayer in them, then you have to repeat the prayer. Simple as that.
Would it be better to just avoid making the prayer? If we were to think about an actual situation where we're on a plane.
To leave the prayer.
Yeah. Would it be better to leave the prayer or to do the prayer sitting?
It would be better, okay, if it comes to being better, it'd definitely be better to make the prayer whilst you're on the seat. But you have to remember that it's now wajib to be made later on as well. It would be better to make it on the seat. I think that's what Abu Musa said. Would you be sinful if you didn't pray on the train or pray, just decide to make qada afterwards?
That's what we're kind of asking.
Yeah, circumstances maybe. Say for example, if someone has wudu and they're on the seat and they can't make the prayer now, the turbulence signs come up, the seats on the belts on sign has come up, but they have wudu, so they can make the prayer, and there's 5 minutes left. They make the prayer. That's better for them. If they leave it, possibly sinful. However, if someone doesn't have wudu, right, and they were intending to go and make wudu and come back and make the prayer, or even on their seat, but obviously the sign has come up and they can't stand up now they won't, they won't be sinful in that circumstance. So yes, it depends on what situation you're in. The hard part is maintaining khushu when you feel people's eyes on you. Yeah, of course, but the prayer with at least the external conditions and the arkan, they need to come first. Like they need to be there, and then obviously the khushu, the added ingredient of perfecting the prayer needs to be there, right? So like someone can't leave the prayer because they think, oh, I don't have khushu. Like what's the point of me praying when I'm going to be thinking about what I'm going to have, what food I'm going to have, and what I'm going to eat later on, and what I'm going to do later on. And so you can't leave the prayer because of that. That's a added ingredient to perfect the prayer, but that's not the thing that makes the prayer invalid. It doesn't make the prayer invalid. I mean, this is obviously down to sort of people how how much khushu they have and so on. What did I miss?
You do a summary.
I could summarize. What is it, about 15, 16 hours?
No, it means just today.
Oh, okay. If you could pray in plane or train properly, would it count? Yes. Very good question, Abu Mohsin. Thank you for bringing that up, because that's something that I missed. If you could pray in the plane or train properly with its fulfill its conditions, would it count in sajda and not on the ground? Actually, it would count, because on the ground doesn't mean it means that your feet and your kind of like, your posture, you're on the ground. In a plane and on a train, it's a substitute of the ground, isn't it? That floor and that area is like ground for you at that point. It's a substitute of the ground. It's like second floor or 13th floor of an apartment. So you don't have to run all the way down every time the prayer time comes and make sure that it's on the ground. The 13th floor of an apartment is the substitute of the ground. That's why interestingly, if here's a question for you then. If, say, for example, someone was to pray stood on a car, on top of a car, on the roof of a car, right? They were to make their prayer. Would that be valid? Would that be valid? It's not a trick question. It's just principle. Think about the principle. Think about what we mentioned, and then just, does it fit in with that? Would that be valid? A flat roofed car. Tesla.
Like a Range or a
Tesla. Yes, good. Yeah. It's that roof is now a substitute of the ground, right? And so you can absolutely, you can make the prayer. Okay. What if the car is moving? If someone, of course, as long as someone doesn't fall off. But what if the car is moving, right? It's on the road, and you're standing on top and making the prayer. Would that be valid now? Abu Mohsin says yes. Muhammad says no. Anyone else think? So the question is, if a person is praying standing on top of a car, on the roof of a car, and the car is moving, would their prayer be valid? Do we have another no? If the car changes direction, no. Well, that's a completely different thing now. The changing of direction, something that I forgot to mention as well, actually. So I'll just pick up on that. Abu Mohsin says yes, because you can fulfill the conditions of sajda, and the others say no. You can't pray because now the moving car is actually not a substitute of the ground, right? So the moving car wouldn't be a substitute of the ground, and so therefore you would not be able to. So you wouldn't be able to make the prayer on top of a moving car now, right? It's again similar to a train. So since now you can stop and you can make it on the ground, you have to stop and make it on the ground. As for changing of direction, someone said no because of changing of direction. Actually, changing of direction doesn't matter, because if you're on a ship and the ship changes, right, it turns, and you're making the prayer and you're sat down, you're seated and making the prayer, as the ship changes direction, you as someone who's making the prayer also need to change direction, so you're facing the Qibla whilst you're making the prayer, right? And so changing of direction doesn't, you would actually, you can change direction with the changing of the transport, right? Similarly, if you're making it on a plane, it's much more difficult. You don't really know which direction the plane has, which direction it's gone. Train may be a bit more easier. So if you're making the prayer on a train and it's if you can, I mean, even with train, it's since it's moving, it's very difficult. But with ship, I mean, the fuqaha have definitely stated this. If the ship changes and you are praying, then you change and face the direction with the changing of the direction of the ship.
But if you're in that situation, the plane, for example,
Yeah, I mean, with the plane, that's if you don't need to change the direction, so you just stay in one direction and you make the prayer, and you complete the rest of the prayer. Okay, that's someone asked about is there a sign that Allah is accepting your worship even if you don't feel spiritual? It's spirituality is something that you have to work on, but it works. It's only going to become stronger with the fulfillment of the faraid, right? You're only going to become spiritually increased, spiritually nourished with the fulfillment of the faraid. If someone starts to chase spirituality, or someone starts to try to increase in spirituality whilst neglecting the faraid, then they won't attain spirituality. There is no spirituality, right? Spirituality is that you first perfect your faraid, and perfecting the fard means you perfect the wajibat. Perfecting the wajib means you perfect the sunnah. Perfecting the sunnah means you perfect the nawafil, the mustahabbat. And so you start there. You make sure that your prayer is full of the extra actions, right? The extra things that the Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us in tradition. And so you would only be increasing in spirituality whilst you are holding on to worship. And whilst you, and so if you are fulfilling your faraid properly, right, then at some point, inshallah, you will start to taste the sweetness of that, right? Work on the extra stuff. Work on, if you're making your 5 daily prayers, now work on how I can perfect those 5 daily prayers, right? How can I fulfill the wajibat properly and the sunnahs and so on and so forth? Those are the things. Once you've got those, then you will really taste the sweetness of worship, and then you'll feel like it's being accepted. But it's not really up to us whether Allah accepts it or not, right? Our duty is actually just to fulfill. It's only to make the prayer. Whether even the most perfect prayer, Allah can still reject that, right? And so really, like the dua of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam after completing the Kaaba, the building of the Kaaba, that which was commanded by Allah, he said, "Rabbana taqabbal minna." Oh Allah, accept it from us, right? That's a dua that he made. So even if we make the prayer, we still ask Allah at the end to accept the prayer from us, to accept it with all its shortcomings, and ask for sweetness of the prayer. Ask for sweetness of iman. Ask Allah that Allah gives us tawfiq to really taste that, so that we're spiritually uplifted, knowing that Allah has accepted that in His court. But even if He doesn't, I mean, we don't need to know. We just have to fulfill. Right. So we leave it there, inshallah. Just a final point again. We run these sessions weekly, every Monday, 8 p.m. They are 1 hour session usually, unless we have extra questions. They might run over by 5-10 minutes. But we started from the purification, the importance of purification, the sunnahs within it, and so on and so forth. We are now covering the prayer itself, the salah. Next week we're going to look at the prostration of recitation in the Quran. There are 14 different places where we have to make sajda after reciting that verse. And so we're going to look at that, who has to do it, who doesn't have to do it, and so on and so forth. And then we will move on to traveler's prayer. We then have the Eid prayer and the Jummah's prayer and Jummah prayer and the conditions and so on. And that'll bring us to the end of Salah. And then inshallah we will move on to the other ibadat, zakat and Ramadan and Hajj, of course. So these are sessions that run weekly. So if if you haven't signed up for it, then please do so. The link is being shared. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.